Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today is the 5th of January 2021, the 72nd anniversary to mark the rights of the Kashmiris to self-determination. The Prime Minister tweeted today, the President tweeted about it today, and interestingly, the Minister for Human Rights, Shireen Mazari, also spoke about that. And interestingly now, this has been a very, very long dispute. And according to the wishes of the Kashmiri people living in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they had a right for plebiscite and to choose what they want to do. This is the first basic human right of any person living on this earth. This concept, unfortunately, because since this was something that was supposed to be resolved through the United Nations resolutions, but it hasn't been done so far. So now, talking about what the Prime Minister said today in his tweet, he said that on the 5th of January 1949, the UN guaranteed the right to self-determination for the people of Jammu and Kashmir through an impartial plebiscite. We observe this day as a reminder to the United Nations and its member states of their unfulfilled commitment to the Kashmiri people. Imran Khan Saab further added that despite suffering for 73 years of brutal Indian occupation, generation after generation of the Kashmiri people remain steadfast in the demand for their inalienable right to self-determination as guaranteed to them under the Charter and by the United Nations Security Council. There's another tweet from the Prime Minister that says that Pakistan stands unequivocally within the Kashmiri people in the struggle for freedom from the tyranny of the most ruthless, inhuman and illegal occupation in modern history. He further stated that we call on the international community to take action against the well-documented human rights violations being committed with impunity by the Indian occupation forces against innocent Kashmiri men, women and children, and to ensure Kashmiris get their right to self-determination. The DGISPR says that the CCC was held at GHQ today, chaired by the Chief of Army Staff. The participants undertook comprehensive review of the regional and domestic security environment with special focus on situation along the borders, internal security and other professional matters of the Army. DGISPR further mentioned that on right of Self-Determination Day, Forum expressed complete solidarity with resilient and brave Kashmiri brethren till the realization of their just cause in accordance with their aspirations and relevant UN Security Council resolutions. Decades of atrocities by the Indian occupation forces have failed to surpass ever-strengthening freedom struggle. Determined Kashmiris shall succeed, inshallah. The Forum reiterated. Forum expressed satisfaction over the positive development in the Afghan peace process and efforts made for regional peace. And there are a couple of cards also that we will be showing you. Kashmiris observe right to self-determination day. World has rejected demographic changes by the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir by India. India's siege of IIOJK and state-sponsored terrorism has to end. UN needs to play its responsibility in resolving Kashmiri conflict and implement its resolutions on Kashmir. There's another one. It says BJP government is using National Investigation Agency, that is known by this NIA, as a coercive tool to surpass the voice of pro-freedom Kashmiri leaders. Asiya Andrabi, the chairperson of Dukhtarane Millat, is imprisoned since last 15 years. My mother has spent over 12. Now, this is actually coming from the son of Asiya Andrabi. It says, my mother has spent over 12 years of her life in prison. I'm only allowed to speak to her for 5 or 10 minutes once a month. That too in the presence of Indian policeman, Ahmed bin Qasim. He further says that my father was jailed just 2 months after I was born. I don't have any childhood memories of him. I'm not alone. Every Kashmiri child has such harrowing stories of the atrocities inflicted on us by the occupying Indian forces. Now, pretty bad situation, and what a story. Interestingly, just imagine the mother is there for the last 12 years in the jail, Asiya Andrabi, and He was hardly a few months old when the father was picked up by the Indian brutal forces and he was jailed too. And he's got no memories. Just imagine that kind of a life. You are imprisoned in a larger prison. Just imagine. This is the living hell as we speak. Just look at the number of people who have no right to even utter a word, and the kind of draconian laws that have been imposed by the Indian military. They too have their story to share. But to talk about today's importance, significance of this particular day, 5th of January, we have with us Rauf Hassan Saab in our studio, who is the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Information and Broadcasting, is also a senior analyst and a columnist. Thank you very much, Rauf Saab, for your time. And we've also been joined in on Sky by Lieutenant General retired Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, who's a senior defense analyst. General Saab, thank you very much for your time, sir.
My pleasure.
Now, Rauf Saab, first of all, sir, the Prime Minister tweeted, the President tweeted, the Human Rights Ministers talked about it. A lot of discussion went on in GSQ today also during the Corps Commanders Conference. But what I'm saying is, sir, it's been 73 years now. And the kind of torture these people are going through. Just imagine, just leave the rest people. I mean, Yasin Malik has his own story to tell. Look at his little daughter. They live in Islamabad, and they have no clue what sort of a condition he's living in at the moment. He's a sick man. And Shabir Shah. And the list goes on and on, on and on. Coming down to Asia Andarabi, been jailed for 12 years. Look at the condition. And she's in Tihar jail. Tihar jail has a history.
Curious.
Exactly. So many people went missing and so on and so forth. I mean, do you believe that this is the right approach by the Indian perspective in order to curb this homegrown indigenous movement for self-determination, sir?
Well, if you want to review it historically, then such movements, wherever they were initiated, they have ultimately led to success. So even if the Indians were to live behind this sort of to suffer from this perception, that they have been able to subdue the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. They know that they're sadly mistaken about it. You talk about jail. Frankly, the entire Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is like a jail today. It has been under a virtual lockdown for the last 15 months or so. Their contact with the outside world is very limited. So there are jails within jails, but virtually there's nobody living in freedom in that part of the world. I don't think that this indigenous movement, the Indians can actually succeed in subduing this indigenous movement, for all times to come. Although the actions that they've taken, the initiatives that they've taken, they're trying to change the demographic nature of this part of the world, the Valley of Jammu and Kashmir. And if they succeed in that design, it could be that 10, 15 years down the lane, they say, all right, now is the time to have a plebiscite conducted, and at that moment in time, if they have succeeded in changing the demographics of that region,
being changed at a very rapid pace.
So the point that I'm trying to make this point simply because those 73 years have passed, but we don't have much time any longer to just keep waiting and issuing statements of condemnation of what Indians are doing in that part of the world. It's time to act, and the government of Pakistan too must think in terms of coming up with some innovative initiatives which would sort of force the Indian government to give in to the demands of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Because if we keep waiting, I think, let me tell you that in the next 10 to 20 years, the situation on ground is going to be so totally different, that the Indians possibly would be the ones to say, all right, let's have plebiscite in this part of the world. It's no longer a question, we have waited for 73 years, and it's no longer a question of waiting for things to happen or for the Indian government to make mistakes, which work to the advantage of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It's time to act now, and that action must come in shape of some out-of-the-box initiatives. I'm not saying that we have to go to another war with India, but I think there are ways and means to exert pressure and to enhance the magnitude of
so out-of-the-box solutions were also presented by Musharraf. If you remember, at that time, the foreign minister, Kusuri Saab, I remember, he said the political Kashmir issue is going to be sorted out in 2 days. 2 days. Just imagine that kind of news coming from your foreign minister while he is visiting with the president, and such a powerful president, and they were in India. And we were like so excited. Nothing happened because those commas, and you exactly know the full stops, they mean so much to them. And again, as they say that Mr. Advani played a very negative role along with a couple of bureaucrats, and all in vain at the end of the day.
Sushma Swaraj, who's now dead,
Yeah.
you know, I think that was another lady.
She was also the External Affairs Minister.
That was a major concession made by the government of Pakistan for the cause of peace, continued peace in this part of the world. And I think that major concession possibly would have come back to hit Pakistan negatively, you know, over a period of time. But at that given moment in time, it was all but done. But unfortunately, the Indians, you know, balked again. They did not sign on the dotted line, although all details had been sorted out. And you can read the book by Mr. Khurshid Kasuri. You know, it has a huge chapter, you know, in it. And I think every detail is given in that. How was it negotiated? What were the 4 major elements of that that agreement, and how it would have worked in the next 10 to 20 years? You know, starting from then. But
do you think that was a viable formula, sir?
I feel yes,
but
it was a concession made by Pakistan for the cause of peace. But yes, it was a viable formula. But it required very close cooperation between the governments of Pakistan and India,
which the Indians were not ready for.
Actually, the Indians were not even willing to sign it. You know, the cooperation would have come later, but the Indians, you know, balked at the last moment when President Musharraf was there.
And they were waiting just for the signing ceremony.
They were yes,
yeah,
but
that's true.
They did not. They backed out. It was a workable formula. It was a workable formula if both governments, you know, had remained committed to it over a period of time, because it was, you know, it was the beginning of the solution. It was not the end of the solution. The solution was there. We just paved the way, which would have led to a solution in about 10, 15, 20, 30 years.
And, you know, solution doesn't mean that, you know, certain decision has been taken and the very next day you see a total different change.
No, it was not.
It is not possible.
It
will gradually
It was not. So it
be
was a workable, it was a pragmatic formula. It was a workable formula dependent on, for its success, the cooperation and continued trust between the governments of Pakistan and India. And you know, let's not forget the fact, you know, that it was BJP that was in power in India at that moment.
But that was a very different BJP, sir.
But that BJP was a totally different BJP as compared to
people like Atal Bihari Vajpayee,
Prime Minister Modi's BJP. This is a fascist government, you know. This is a Hindutva-dominated government. You know, it is actually virtually conducting a genocide in Kashmir.
That's
its own time. It's sort of making people die in that part of the world. Now, the second point that I would like to raise here before you go to General Saab is the insensitivity of the world. You know, the world is no longer dominated by the ethical or moral or human rights sort of yardsticks. It is only dominated by economic interests. You know. So, you know, Pakistan cannot continue to bank that the world conscience is going to awaken one of these days, you know, and all of a sudden it will act any differently than it has been in the last 73 years. No, no. The responsibility rests on Pakistan and on the people of Kashmir. So we have to sort out something, you know, whereby, you know, we can at least initiate the process of until ultimate deliverance of the people of Kashmir from that perpetual custody which the Indians have imposed on them. So we can no longer bank on the world. We can no longer hope that the UN is going to change, or, you know,
so we should not keep high hopes from the United Nations.
No.
If they haven't been able to resolve this issue during the last 72, 73 years, it won't be sorted out in the near future as well.
Not at all.
That's for sure.
All. So we have to, what I'm concerned about is the lack of initiative on the part of Pakistan to lead to an ultimate solution of the state of problem of
and you know, we always needed consistency. Unfortunately, during certain regimes in Pakistan, there wasn't a very consistent effort, even in the United Nations, that, you know, prime ministers were told to talk about it.
That's right.
Rather than it should have been their own initiative. Yeah. But coming to you, General Saab, now there are a couple of points. A lot of analysts I talk to, they believe that, you know, it's great to give them political support, moral support, and diplomatic support. But now it's high time to primarily, you know, go for some sort of a physical support of Kashmiris as well. Now, when we talk about the innovative initiatives or innovative solutions just mentioned by Rauf Saab, sir, the general idea is that there are certain very strong elements within the decision-making bodies of Pakistan, maybe who want the situation to remain like this. The second opinion is that maybe Pakistan is not a very strong country as far as economy is concerned, so certain things we could have done, we are unable to do. And at the same time, when you talk about the current standing of the Indian government regarding Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A and the special status of the Kashmiris that was snatched as well. So situation on ground has literally changed, sir. Do you think, sir, the old school of thought that actually prevails even now would be something that is going to deliver us whatever we desire, or you think there has to be slightly different approach towards the main cause, sir?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think Pakistan's policy of providing political, moral, and diplomatic support has not changed, and it needs to continue. Yes, I think the Kashmir policy itself needs some reappraisal and a number of revisions. When we are talking of what this policy should comprise, I think it needs to build upon and follow up some of the events which we have seen in the last year, and I'd like to mention a few of them. The first one is that the issue of Kashmir is not an internal issue of India. It is now an issue between three nuclear powers, and I think we need to focus on that. We also need to focus on the fact that all the political parties of the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they have been united and they have rejected Indian decisions that the Indian government has taken, and this includes, the Kashmiri diaspora. So we need to actually emphasize this aspect. You must have heard Mr. Farooq Abdullah's interview to Karan Thapar recently, where he made very significant points. And the first point was that yes, the Kashmiri land belongs to India, but they have lost the people of Kashmir. We need to actually emphasize this. He also made a mention that no Kashmiris would like to be called Indians, and he said that they would prefer a Chinese government in Kashmir rather than the Indian Kashmir. And he finally said that all Kashmiris now regard themselves as slaves. So we need to emphasize on this. We also need to emphasize, the violation of the human rights. We need to raise the level to the United Nations Human Rights Council, which comprises 47 members, and it has got 3 vice presidents. I think whatever is being said right now and what was said by Dr. Shireen Mazari in her media conference, I think all that needs to be individually, independently communicated to each member of the UN Human Rights Council. We need to emphasize and continue our efforts with the OIC. We need to actually also coordinate all our efforts with the Chinese, as we have been doing it last year. And it was for the first time last year that I think in 50 years, the United Nations Security Council met at least to discuss the issue. That's a different issue, whether something substantial came out of that or not, but it was discussed, and I think that achievement. We also need to emphasize to the international community that India is now a one-party fake democracy that thrives on fake news, as reported by the EU Disinformation Lab. We need to follow up on that and to say that what it is hiding in Kashmir from the international community, from the world, from the various human rights organizations that was talked about, by Dr. Shireen Mazari and also we also need to, we also need to recognize that the Kashmir issue is going to be resolved through collective efforts by Pakistan, by the Kashmiris across the political, the line of control, with the assistance and coordination of China and with selected OIC Muslim countries which have consistently supported our positions. Finally, I'd like to make 2 comments, and that is, the people of Kashmir would need thousands of leaders like Asian Darabi for them to emulate, and we needn't remind the people of Kashmir what Nelson Mandela had said, in before his trial in I think it was in 1969, when he said that he would be prepared to die for his freedom. And finally, I'd like to say that we can be hopeful that with the change of administration in the United Nations, in the United States, I think the Biden administration would be more practical. It will be more practical. It will be more balanced and more sympathetic towards human rights in general, wherever they are in the world, and particularly in Kashmir. And I think we need to remind them about what Mr. Thomas Jefferson believed while he was drafting the American Declaration of Independence. I'd like to quote, and he said, "If rulers exceeded their constitutional authority, the people would in principle be justified if they resorted to armed revolt." So I think our Kashmir policy that needs to be reappraised and needs to include this practical aspect of providing support to them. If we have to have an international Kashmir fund for this very purpose that I just talked about, I think that will greatly facilitate in resolution of the Kashmir policy. And I am sure, the Kashmir Committee could also do a better job towards this goal.
All right. Now, Rauf Saab, there are a couple of points. I mean, initially, I remember when the Chinese president Xi Jinping was supposed to visit Pakistan, and there was this dharna going on of PTI. So he went to India first, and later on he came to Pakistan. I remember when he landed and he met the Indian leadership there. So there was a statement, and it came from him. It said, well, we have enough wisdom to look after our affairs, even the border disputes. But we really want to move forward as far as the economy is concerned, or trade is concerned, or increasing so many. There were so many avenues, when you talk about such a huge market India is, and so is the case with Chinese. And interestingly, when you look at that number, and they really want to take it up to $100 billion when you talk about the bilateral trade, that's unbelievable. Now, later on, we got to know that there is something going on by the Indians. They want to build a road, or maybe whatever they were up to. They were stopped by the Chinese. And then this whole issue started regarding Ladakh, and we got to know that, a certain number of soldiers were killed by the Chinese. And then similar reports came in as well. What I'm trying to ask you, sir, is that do you believe that after the involvement of the Chinese in that area in particular, and the kind of engagement as far as defense cooperation is concerned that's going on between the two countries, do you think the Chinese influence would matter at some stage, the kind of growing influence they have all over the world, maybe 2 years from now, 3 years from now, maybe 5 years from now, that this issue could be highlighted in the United Nations Security Council at a reasonable level? I'm not saying that this should be the only, talk of the town, but at least it should be considered by the decision-making bodies, sir.
The fact, that the Kashmir dispute has been discussed at the Security Council level, 3 times in about a year's time, is owed to China. They are the ones.
Yeah, they always take it there.
And all that. But see, again, going back in history, let's go back to Simla Agreement. That is when India and Pakistan sat across the table and decided that the matter is going to be resolved bilaterally. But that was dependent on Article 370 and 35A continuing to rule the relationship between India and the Indian occupied Kashmir. That unfortunately was abrogated, by the Indians. Consequently, it is no longer a bilateral matter between India and Pakistan. And Pakistan, the government of Pakistan has already reiterated that it's no longer a bilateral
decides
agreement.
that it is no more a bilateral issue.
So that is step number 1. That is actually fact number 1. Second is that it is also not a bilateral agreement, because after abrogation of 370 and 35A, the Chinese have a claim on a part of Ladakh also.
Correct.
Right? So, China is very much a part of this dispute now.
So there are 4 parties now.
So
Pakistan,
there is India, there is
China,
Pakistan, and there is China. And of course, the people of Kashmir, they're central to this dispute. You know, they are the people of Kashmir, you know, in the Indian occupied Kashmir, as well as in the Azad Jammu and Kashmir, you know, that is the part administered by Pakistan. So this is one reality, basically, that it is, and it is on this front that from a bilateral dispute, technically, to a multilateral dispute now, or an international dispute, you know, we have not been able to really highlight it in that way at the international fora, and this is something that you're also pointing out, that we should take it to the United Nations. United Nations has discussed it 3 times in the last 1 year. What have they done? What has been the follow-up, either from their side or from our side? So what we are suffering from is basically an inertia which is crept in, be that at the Kashmir Committee level or at the Foreign Office level or at other levels. Basically, we have not been able to sort of break out of this logjam, you know, that we have kind of imposed on ourselves. We really have to, because we have little, this is the most important reality to the problem. We have little time now. There's no 73 more years, you know, for us to wait, or even 50 years, or even 25 years to wait. Kashmir would have changed demographically by then. It would have gone out of our hand. It is India then who would be insisting, you know, on holding a plebiscite in Kashmir, and then they would come to Pakistani part of Kashmir. So the pressure would be building on Pakistan. The time to act is now, and this is critical. It is critical. We raised the question of Chinese support. The Chinese support was there in 1962 when it went to war with India. That was a golden opportunity for Pakistan to have acted. We did not act under American pressure. The Americans kept us away from there. It was a golden opportunity. Then, of course, you know, the Kargil incident, you know, which was mishandled in Pakistan at multiple levels. And it's very difficult to go to war now because we are 2 nuclear armed states. Consequently, it is only through diplomacy and innovative diplomacy, different kind of diplomacy. It is by breaking the inertia that we are sunk in at this moment in time that we shall be able to do something about it. And we must, you see, because like we generally refer, you know, there's just too many semantics to our issues, you know. We kind of drown our critical issues, you know, in a pile of semantics. It is our jugular vein. It actually is a jugular vein. But what have we done to get that jugular vein so that we could become a whole country? And when we look at that, we feel that, you know, succeeding
they also
governments
call it the two tongue. That means that, you know, they are equally involved. I mean, they also believe this is their part. Now,
succeeding governments have failed. We just keep talking about it. Time for talking has passed.
So is war a solution now?
I would never say that.
Because war itself is a problem.
I'm one person who's committed to peace. But the fact is that you have to raise the ante. You have to raise the ante. You know, this is what our diplomats should be doing. You know, you raise the ante to a level that it actually does not degrade into a war, but it remains there. You have to sort of do it on a minute-to-minute, on an hour-to-hour basis. But I feel that, you know, that is what we are not doing.
But
we're not being able to
I still remember
sensitize the world community on different levels. Okay, it's an outstanding dispute.
You need to market your case well.
But the fact is that it's a human rights issue right now. We have not been able to raise that at the international fora effectively. We may have talked about it once in a while, like the Prime Minister went, he delivered a beautiful speech there at the United Security Council in New York. You know, but what has been the follow-up to that? I feel that, well, yes, I don't think we have been able to kind of follow up on that effectively. See, we should think of out-of-box solutions, as I said. You know, it's no longer time to wait. We can't wait. Every day that passes, we're losing control on that part of
and that's exactly what India wants.
And that's exactly
lingering
what
on the case.
India, well, on the other hand, India is doing all that it needs to change the demographics of Kashmir. So they are working while we are sitting back and watching. This is not the way we can get Kashmir.
This part of Kashmir is practically in the Indian control. Look at the number of forces they've deployed there. The kind of influence they have. I mean, I was reading an article that all those who are practically involved in gatherings and otherwise, maybe students, the drivers, the truck drivers, bus drivers. So you know what, they're targeting those people. Initially, they were really capturing them and torturing them. They still use that technique. But now, for example, if there is a student, they would offer him a scholarship so that, you know, his ideology is changed to an extent, you know, he becomes pro-India. I still remember when our ambassador, Abdul Basit Saab, was there and he met the Hurriyat leadership, and there was a lot of hue and cry by the Indians. So, you know, the Indians, they have always tried
and our
to
Prime
put
Minister
pressure
Nawaz Sharif went and he
did not meet them.
Conference. So who is to blame?
Our own leadership.
Our own people, our own leadership particularly. I mean, this government is doing pretty much, really. You see, but again, we are not understanding the gravity of the situation at this moment in time, that each day that passes, as I said, basically, you know, our grip is, you know, slipping. It's not sort of strengthening, it is slipping. So, you know, we have to think of these things. And China's support is not going to be like, you know, all right, you know, let's attack India. That's not the way it is going to be. Basically,
it never works like that also.
Opportunities are created. And when those opportunities are created, we have to exploit those opportunities. We have let opportunities slip out of our hand in the past. We can't afford to do it again. Now we have to actually create an opportunity. And I feel that that opportunity will be created if we raise this issue at the international fora incessantly, forcefully, as a human rights issue. Not as a disputed issue.
Because that idea is going to penetrate in their minds, otherwise it is going to be a problem.
You know, we have not been able to awaken the
We have been doing that, not the regular procedures.
We have not done it. We have not done it. It requires work. It requires hard work. It requires ingenuity. It requires out-of-box ideas.
I think the Foreign Office, the military, and you know, people like you for that matter, people who write or who are the opinion makers, they should all collectively sit together and come up with certain, you know, I'm not saying there's going to be, but there has to be a consistent effort. That is what the need of the hour is.
Brainstorming, you know. Absolutely. You can't brainstorm, you know, like you have been for 73 years. No, that is not going to take you anywhere.
As they say, no, you have to listen to the dull and the ignorant too. They too have their story.
You have to.
Because we have been following one straight line, and that was the policy maybe, but it has not yielded any results, unfortunately. Now, General Saab, talking about the innovation, and talking about the innovative solutions. Now, look at the current condition of India, sir. The Sikhs are on the roads. I mean, every day we see them, you know, I really, honestly speaking, I really give credit to them, because the kind of harsh conditions that are in Delhi, weather-wise and otherwise, they are still very determined for their cause, and they have a very legitimate right
42
also.
42 days now.
It's been
42 days.
Just imagine. And you're talking about the winters of Delhi, sir.
Yes.
Now, General Saab, the point is that at the same time, there are a lot of hue and cry on the eastern side of India as well, sir. I'm not supporting the Khalistan movement, but what I'm saying is that even these slogans have been raised there as well. You talk about sportsmen, you talk about singers, you talk about actors. They've been there in support of these farmers now. Now, this issue and the issue of extremism is also like gaining strength by each passing day in India. Atrocities against the Muslims, the Hindu, I would say people from the lower caste, the Dalits primarily, and then even Sikhs now. You talk about the Parsis, they have been under a lot of pressure by the extremist Hindus as well. Now, looking at this condition within India, so don't you think this is the right time to sort of highlight the issues? Forget about what the West is doing. What we need to do is something which we will be able to deliver. Nobody else is going to do that for us. Sir.
You know, the issues of Indian minorities, of course, it is for the Indians to resolve. What our issue is, you know, the treatment that they are meting out to the 200 million Muslims, the Islamophobia, which is making the life of all Indian Muslims very, very difficult. And I think we have raised this issue at the OIC level and also at the United Nations. The issue of the other minorities, again, like the over 210 million Dalits, the Indian Christians, the Sikhs, the Jains and others, put together, actually, they comprise more than half the population of India. And therefore, you know, if these people are not satisfied because of the present, you know, Hindutva policies of the present government, I think if this kind of government continues, then you will see a partition redux in India, I think in the not too distant future. And therefore, I think the people of India, the opposition parties in India, the Indian media need to be cognizant of this, Also, let me very quickly add that whatever they are doing in Kashmir is not tenable, whether it is politically or it is militarily. Look, they are right now spending about $71 billion every year. That is their total defense budget, which actually forms about 36% of their total financial outlay. And bulk of, the Indian forces, whether they are the Indian Army or the civil armed forces, they are employed on one mission, which I call Mission Impossible, and that is to keep Kashmir in their group. Three-fourths of the entire defense budget goes there to Kashmir. They need to understand that there were 37 countries in Afghanistan. There was NATO, ISAF, the United States, and all these countries spent over $1 trillion. But because the support of the local population was not there with them in Afghanistan, so there was no question of their winning there in Afghanistan. Similarly, it is impossible for India to win whatever the situation is in Kashmir militarily. So the earlier they understand this, the better it would be for the people of Kashmir. And I think this is again something which is being hidden from the people of Kashmir. Indian media outlets like the ANI and others, which were mentioned in the Indian Chronicles, I think they have been telling lies to the Indian media itself, and the same lies were then put in the people's minds. Their perceptions were manipulated about what is being done there. Things that they were using the Indian armed forces against Pakistan and against Kashmiris and against other minorities in order to win votes. These are the kinds of issues, I think, which the people of India needs to know and which Pakistan could highlight. So I think all these issues, they need to be part of our Kashmir policy. And again, I would agree with Rauf Saab that I think we need to work extremely hard. The Kashmir team in the Foreign Office and at other places, they need to meet more frequently. The focus needs to be shifted to the international arena. We in Pakistan are already aware of that. So I think whatever time, money or resources is being spent here within Pakistan, even that can be shifted, so that the issue is highlighted further at the international capital, particularly the capitals who actually matter, the international, the P5 countries, the G8 countries, the Kashmiri diaspora, again, wherever they are, in all these countries, they need to be coordinated, their efforts needs to be coordinated by our high commissions and by our embassies there towards the resolution of this very serious issue. Also, we need to highlight to the world that the issue of Afghanistan and the issue of Kashmir, they are interlinked because Pakistan's attentions remains diverted from its eastern border to its western borders. And unless, our eastern borders are settled, and unless, the threat there diminishes or is reduced, and the best would be that the Kashmir is resolved, I think eventually this will bring peace in Afghanistan. And I think this needs to be understood by the United States and all its allies as well as part of, our Kashmir policy.
All right. Now, Rauf Saab, you wanted to add something? Okay, but anyway, I was just going through this old document. It is dated 10 January 1949. And it says, very interesting, it says that, the question of accession of the state of Jammu and Kashmir to India or Pakistan will be decided through the democratic matter of a free and impartial plebiscite. Makes a lot of sense. And then it says that, there has to be a commission formed, and then that commission is going to be reporting to the Secretary General, and then and that commission has to be neutral. And then it further says that they will go and they will find out and they will ensure that a proper referendum takes place in that part. But so over here, when the United Nations Military Observers Group is visiting the Pakistani side of Kashmir, they opened fire on them. I mean, they're not even ready to do that. And you're talking about, will they let the UN form a commission, or will they let, you know, I mean, it seems something which doesn't happen in these circumstances, where the Indians are the strategic partners of the Americans. I mean, how would they let them slip away?
The irony is that it is not Pakistan that took the matter to the UN. It is
Did the
India.
Indians, yeah.
India. And Pakistan agreed once India had agreed to holding a plebiscite.
Does it matter, sir?
It doesn't matter any longer.
That's what the
and
point
we
is,
keep talking about the OIC. General Saab is also talking about the OIC. We have to forget about organizations like the OIC. They don't matter any longer.
But
they don't stand with Pakistan any longer. It's a reality. Let's face the reality. They don't stand with Pakistan. They're not going to do much. We have to go to the international fora. We have to go to the UN. We have to go to the US, to UK, to Europe, to EU, to all these fora, and we have to sort of sensitize them about it, about the need to look into this matter, because after all, it's a nuclear war flashpoint. India and Pakistan make a nuclear war flashpoint, and actually it can erupt. You never know.
It is
while I think both are responsible countries. Let's say both are responsible countries. The fact of the matter is that in matters like this, even a tiny spark can ignite a holocaust. So let's not forget that. And I think if I were the one basically, and I were to look at it today, I would completely forget what we have done in the past, and I would come up with a completely different roadmap. New vision, new roadmap, and particularly when we know that we don't have time to waste on our side. So far as the Indian is concerned, I wanted to highlight another point: the hypocrisy and the duplicity of the world when it comes to dealing with India on the one hand and Pakistan on the other hand.
But unfortunately, that's the reality, sir.
If Pakistan had fired a shot at the UNO MOGIP,
it would have been the headlines.
It would have been headline internationally. Not a statement has been made on this. Not a statement anywhere. Even from the United Nations, a very muted comment. Not a statement of condemnation. So this is the world that we are living in today.
And I was reading an article in the Times of India about this, and the Indians totally denied. They said they
denied it. Yeah. They denied it. If we had done it, people would have already come here. International representatives would have entered this part of the world, and said, "Okay, we want to examine it ourselves."
That prevails.
So we are, and two, another point that you've raised, I think we need to discuss it a little further. In spite of the fact that I'm advocating that we should sensitize the international community to the need for resolving this crisis, the international community, the Western community, is not going to be. We can't make them interested, because primarily we have taken a strategic position which runs counter to their interest in this part of the world. If we would want them to help us resolve the Kashmir dispute, then we will have to compromise our own strategic interest and move from China to the Western world. We've done that, through the earlier days of our independence, and look what happened to us. So obviously, it's a strategic interest in China. We have a strategic interest in China, which is not going to finish, which in fact is going to become stronger and stronger with the passage of time.
But that's the same cases with the Indians and the Americans now.
That's it. So what I mean is this.
It neutralizes everything.
Yeah, what I mean is
rather it gives them an edge.
That in spite of the efforts that we may make, it is yet very difficult to get the international community interested in resolving the crisis on the side of Pakistan. I feel that they may get on the side of India and force Pakistan to forget about it, which of course Pakistan would not. See, and then this is the new axis of power emerging, but this axis of power will possibly take another 10 to 20 years to really emerge, which begins in China and through Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, Central Asia, and it ends at Russia basically. This is the new emerging power base in the world. But it's going to take some time. And by then, I feel, unfortunately, that it may be a bit too late. So, what are the options that we have? This is what we should be brainstorming. This is what we should be deliberating. We should not be stuck in the imbroglio of our past, basically, like we have been. We have to come out of it.
Yeah.
We have to come up and think of few things, basically, because sitting back is not an option for Pakistan. Like war is not an option for Pakistan. Similarly, sitting back is not an option. Or remaining stuck in the past is not an option. So we come out of the past and see what are the options for us now at this hour that we are living. And we must go for them in a very aggressive way, we should take it forward. We should not be just sitting here. I mean, for example, since the Prime Minister made that speech at the UN, how many delegations have we sent to the world? How many delegations have we sent to the world to apprise them of the growing crisis in the Indian part of Kashmir?
You need to have a very consistent approach.
And then, you not only that, and I think another thing that I would like to point out here, and it is very, 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 very serious, which is which unfortunately is the subversion, which is being created in this country, by our own political parties running an agitation at this hour. This is not something that is doing any good to the cause of Kashmir or to any other cause that Pakistan is fighting for. This is time to unify behind the government. This is a time to stand behind the government.
It needs,
a
very collective approach, and all the political parties, they need to be on the same page.
All kind of accusations are being hurled at the government, that we have sold Kashmir and we have done this and we have done that. These are not statements, that I see coming out in India. Why are these such kind of statements coming out here in Pakistan when it is time to unify, when it is time to coordinate efforts with the government?
I would say, sir.
So,
immature politics, because when it comes to the state policy, one has to
this is not immature politics. Let me go a step beyond. This is subversive politics. And I'm saying this, I didn't want to say it, but this is subversive politics. The inimical forces, which lie outside the boundaries of this country, they're getting support from aiders and abettors within the country. And we're seeing it all over.
That's the most
unfortunate part. This is not the way things should be at this hour. And Pakistan is facing multiple kind of challenges from all around.
And some challenges, I think, there are homegrown challenges as well, sir, unfortunately. But anyway, sir, I was just told that we're running out of time. It was a pleasure having you, Rauf Saab, as always. Jail Saab, thank you so much for your time, sir, and your presence as well. And that's all we have for this hour. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow at 8. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you.